Yo 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 guys, what is up? Dar is back for Dar Gaming, and today we are doing our World of Tanks. Now I thought about this, and because we were starting our new series for World of Tanks, and we had our video last week, so I thought since we're not starting from with a brand new account, I have my Americans at tier 6. I'm at tier 5 for the Germans, tier 5 for French, and tier 5 and 6 for the and tier 4 for the Russians. So I thought we would go ahead and play catch up here, and we'll look at all the tanks that I have played up to this point, and I will let you know what I thought of them, and as far as the strengths, weaknesses, were they good tanks, were they just something you just grind through, how that worked out. Now these are just going to be my opinions, and this week we are going to start with the US, because it's at the front of the tree. Now these are only going to be the ones I've played with, so here we go. Alright, so you start off with the T1 Cunningham. Basically like a tractor. And this here leads you into all your different trees, your lights, your mediums, destroyers, and your artillery. So, as far as, a starting tank, an opening tank, it was alright. This was actually I don't know if this is my favorite or my second favorite, but it was pretty close. I really enjoyed the tank. It looks like a tractor, plain and simple. You can see the picture here, but overall I thought it was a pretty neat little tank. It kind of helped, really did a good job with, showing you how the game worked. And I really liked, the semi-automatic guns and stuff. I mean, it didn't feel tankish, like really the way a tank should. With semi, you don't think of a tank going da 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 da, with shooting their guns. But it was pretty cool. I liked it. Alright, so we're gonna get out of that. Now we're gonna shoot down the artillery, since that was my shortest tree, because I really didn't care for artillery myself, but a lot of people like it. So I'll go through what I thought of what I started with. I started with the T-57. Now this tank, or we'll call it a tank. This tank or mobile artillery, it was okay for what it was. You're just starting out. It's tier 2. Did a pretty good job of learn, making it fairly easy to learn and stuff. The drawback with this gun, or with this one, was there is no gun upgrade for it. So you're stuck with the default gun, for the entire time you're on it. And the gun only shoots about halfway down the battlefield. So if your team is advancing across the field, you're going to have to advance with them at least part of the way, so you can reach, at least the enemy base or the other end of the map. Alright, so then we move up to the M37, which was as far as I had gone. I like this one a hell of a lot more. You start off with the 105mm howitzer M3. You upgrade to the 105mm howitzer M4. Now, once you upgraded to this gun, you were able to reach the other end of the field on most maps. So that made it a whole lot easier. Overall, it was a good SPG. So I can't really complain too much with it, as far as SPGs go. Now the reason you're not going to see a whole lot of SPGs from me, and at least not in the immediate future, maybe later, if y'all really want, we'll buy one or two and we'll try it out and, get some videos together and see how it goes. But the playstyle of an SPG, it's really slow. You got to wait for really slow reloads, and you really got to wait for your targeting to kind of zero in on the target, and you got to hope the target doesn't move, because if the target moves, then you have to reacquire the target and zero in again. So that's really why I was not into SPGs. Alright, so go from the T-Cunning down the medium to the heavies. You start with the T2 medium tank. This was a pretty good tank. I like this one. For its tier, it's a pretty good tank. When it got up against, say, tier 4s, it's very fragile. But for its tier 1, fighting the second tier and tier 1s, it was a very dominating tank. And again, I almost always get the biggest gun. No, I'm not compensating. God, no, but I always want the big gun. So I always, upgrade it to that 37mm gun in the M5. But what I do like about this is you always see, especially, if you're American and you're doing an American tank, you see these names that really ring a bell, like the 37mm Browning semi-automatic gun. If anybody that's ever into history or anything, these are really, really cool. I really like it. And then you can always go to vehicle details, and you can read, the M2 medium tank was an experimental medium tank developed from 1930 to 1932. However, the model never saw mass production. Which was, I guess, I would say a shame, but, because it was a good tank, at least in game, but you can't really compare that to real life. Alright, so moving down, the M2 medium tank. This tank was killer. I loved this tank. You got the, it started off with the M37, which was fine. For what it was, no problem. And then I got the 37 M6. Again, it was a good gun. It was definitely an upgrade. But then after I got the improved, the better turret, the second generation turret, and then put that 75mm howitzer on here. Oh my God, this tank owned. This was an incredible tank. It's only a tier 3, and once you put that howitzer on there, you can damage tier 5s easy. I love this tank. It was awesome. So then, I'm going to back. So I could just go here, but I'd rather go here so we can see the whole thing. Alright, then we go back, and then we get our M3 Stuart, or M3 Lee. Okay, so our M3 Lee. I did not enjoy this tank whatsoever. It started with the 75 gun M2. It was a decent gun. And then you get the 75 M3. Now, the 75 M3 is an incredible gun. It does a lot of damage for its tier. You can see here, we go to characters. It did 110 to front and sides of the tank, of an enemy tank. And 175 average damage to the rear of the tank. This was a very good gun. The problem with this tank, which makes this tank a grind fest, is you have this gun right here, if you can see my cursor, and then you have the turret. The turret does not move. The turret is only there for looks. The gun on the very front of the tank is what you use, which makes this medium tank essentially a tank destroyer. And the tank doesn't operate like a tank destroyer. It's not built to be a tank destroyer. If they'd given us, the option of maybe using both or using one or the other, that would have been great. But, with that being, it doesn't have any of the great benefits that a tank destroyer has, but it operates like one, which made this tank a huge grind. Okay, we're going to go on over here to our heavy tree. From the M3 Lee to the T1 Heavy. This tank was okay. It's a tier 5 heavy tank. As far as tier 5 heavy tanks go, which there are only 3 now, when I was playing it, there was only 2. It's a little bit better than the French model, the French tier 5 tank. But it is nothing compared to the Russian tier 5 tank, which we will get to in a future episode. The biggest complaint with it, the guns are okay for their tier. They're just fine for penetrating most things their tier and everything below their tier. The biggest complaint I had with this tank is the armor is weak. And it takes a lot of damage. So your survivability isn't what I would have expected out of a heavy tank. But overall, it's not horrible. It's not a horrible tank. It is, you can have some fun with it. As a matter of fact, we can look here. I still have this tank. The T1 Heavy. This is it right here. It's got big sides on it, a big old ass on the back of it, and the front of it, it's flat all the way around. So it takes a lot of damage. What you're looking for in a tank really is sloped. You want sloped areas because that, deflects other shells. With this being all flat, it's like a car running into a brick wall. So it takes all the damage. It's just not a good design. As a matter of fact, we can click on it, look at the details. The heavy tank, T1 heavy tank, was development of this tank started in the spring of 1940 and September of 1940 and December 1941. Prototypes underwent trials. The tank was never mass produced. Later, it became a popular prototype for the M6, which is our next tank. But before we go there, I want to go back to M3 Lee. Let's read that one. The M3 Lee, developed on the basis of the M2, which we've seen the M2 light, the M2 light tank, with a total of 6,258 vehicles manufactured in June 1941 through December 1942. The vehicle saw mass production the vehicle saw combat in North Africa, the Philippines. The M3 Grant was supplied to Great Britain and the USSR under land lease. So this was a tank that actually saw combat. Alright, is the M6. This is the tank I am currently on. So you're going to go to the M6 from the T1 Heavy. You will notice a vast difference, a vast improvement over the T1. This tank is pretty much still built the same way. It's all boxy. We can shut this down. We can go over to the M6, and again, this is the M6. T1, M6. You can't see a whole lot of difference. But, it's still flat on the sides, flat on the back, pretty much flat on the front. This part here is, kind of rounded out a little bit more. But it's got a lot thicker armor, so it can take a lot more punishment than the T1. Also, it's got up to a 90mm M3 cannon, which will pump out 7.8 rounds per minute with a average damage of 214 on front and back and 320 damage to the rear of an enemy tank. So a lot more damage than the T1. The M6 is not bad. It is still kind of a grind, but it's not that bad. It's not anywhere near as bad as the T1. And T1 was passable. Like I said, as long as you're not upset, if you're in your tier, as long as you're not up against, say, KVs, then you're doing great. This tank will penetrate and damage everything in its tier and below. The only tank I ever really had trouble with was the KV3 in this tank. Just like I had problems with the KV1 when I was in the T1 Heavy. Alright, and if we go back, here, we'll just click on here. Read a little bit on this one. It was just developed from 1940 through 1942, with a total of 40 vehicles manufactured from November 1942 through February 1944. It never saw action. Again, with all these flat sides, there was no way. It was not up to par, compared to its opponents. Plain and simple. Alright, so we go back to our tree, and we're going to go back to our M3 Lee where we were. And we go from the M3 Lee to one of my personal favorites. And this is one of my personal favorites since I was a child. Is the M4 Sherman. I fell in love with this tank when I was a kid and I saw the movie Tank. It was a great movie. Alright, the M4 Sherman was a great tank, especially once you got up to 76mm M1A1. This tank was phenomenal. It's got good engine, good tracks, good weapons. You can catch a KV. Like, remember, this is a tier 5 tank. The tier 1 heavy was also a tier 5. The tier 1 heavy had problems versus a KV, where this one I could run in circles around a KV and just constantly be shooting him, and he couldn't catch me. He'd be trying to turn with his turret trying to catch me, and I could just outrun his turret, just keep popping him until he died. This tank was phenomenal. It took a lot of damage because the front end of it was sloped. The turret was heavily armored. For its tier, at a tier 5, it could dominate anything its tier and tiers anything below it. It could penetrate any of the heavies in a tier 5. This thing was phenomenal. I loved this tank. If we look at the historical facts on it, the first production model of the Sherman, the most common American tank, with an amazing total of 49,234 vehicles manufactured. The Sherman first saw combat in North Africa. So this is a real life tank. I mean, this thing was awesome. Alright, now I did not go to the Easy 8. I skipped the Easy 8, which you could have went to from the Sherman. Instead, I went to the Easy 4 or the Easy 2. The Easy 2 had more armor than the Sherman. Otherwise, they were the exact same thing. This is an upgraded version of the M4 Sherman. A lot more armor and a lot more firepower. This one went up to this tank was originally designed for we'll just read it. The variant of the Sherman featured much heavier armor than the E2. Much heavier armor. Okay. The E2 was literally intended as an infantry support tank. However, once equipped with the M1A1 gun, it served as tank hunters for that reason. And the M1A1 is here. The top gun is the M1A2, which just gives you more increased speed to reloading, so it reloads faster. This tank is phenomenal. Again, penetrate anything in its tier, including the KV-3. The 76mm M1A2 gun I've had more success with than I have the 90mm on the M6, which is the heavy of the same tier. I love this tank. I'm going to keep this tank. This tank is going nowhere. It's fast, it's well armored, and it's got the firepower for its tier. And we can look at it right here. This is it. You can see how the front, if we look up inside, the front is sloped, which help it deflect armor, or deflect the incoming rounds. The sides, again, are flat, so that's its downfall. The back has a slight slope to it, but it's not the best in the back. And you see how at the sides right here, it's sloped there for deflection. So it is built with a lot more deflection, the idea of deflecting ammo and taking the hits, than even the M6 was. This is a great tank. I love it, and I will be keeping it. This one, the Easy 8, and the M4 Sherman should be in no way considered a grind. These tanks are phenomenal. They're a blast to drive. I love them. Alright, getting back. I don't sound biased at all, do I? Alright, so then we take the M2 light tank to go down the light tank tree, which also goes into mediums, but we're going to hit the mediums from the E2 in future videos once I get there. Alright, so the M2 light tank. This tank was pretty good. I mean, I really had no complaints with it. It was fast. It was a lot of fun. It really was. I loved this tank in the tier 2. It was a lot of fun. Same deal. It can, in its tier, it can take the hits. It can dish it out the damage, and it's fast as all get out. If we read the things on it, it says this tank was designed for infantry support. A total of 696 vehicles were manufactured from 1935 through 1942. The tank saw combat with the Marines on the canal, and was withdrawn from service in 1942. I can't pronounce that. I know exactly what canal it is, but it's the canal up by the Japanese islands that Japan and America were fighting over constantly. Very, very famous, and I can't even remember it. It's like right on the tip of my tongue. So as soon as the video's over, I'll remember what it was. Alright, so we're going to move on to the M3 Stuart. Again, I love this tank. This tank was a blast. Very fast. Armor was pretty decent on it, and it could dish out damage for a tier 3. You know, in its tier, it was really good. It was definitely capable of standing up to anything in its tier, and definitely everything below its tier. Great tank. The M3 Stuart was the best known light tank of World War II. With a total of 13,859 vehicles manufactured from 1941 through September of 1943, the M3 Stuart was used in all theaters of war. Makes sense, because I mean, this in game, this tank is awesome. I love it. I loved it. I don't have it anymore. I went to the M5 Stuart. In it, for its class, the M4, I don't know, it's okay. I didn't like it anywhere near as much as I did the M3. It did, however, use the same gun and same turret as the M2 medium tank. It had the 75mm howitzer on it, which is awesome. 75mm howitzer. This gun was incredible. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. It does a lot of damage. Accuracy's not the best, but that didn't matter. You know, it was just an awesome gun. The only downfall to this tank that I seen, it was very fast. The only downfall was it has very, very, very light armor. So at tier 4, it took a lot of damage from heavies. Well, there was no heavies at that time, but SPGs and destroyers ate it up because it could not take any damage. Even a lot of the mediums ate it up. It just didn't have the armor. Alright, we're going to look at... We went from there. That's where we stopped the light line. But I did pick up this one. This is the M7 medium tank. This is on the same tier as the M4 Sherman. Tier 5. Let's look at the historic thing before I give my opinion. Development on this tank started in the spring of 1941. The construction and of experimental vehicles was launched in January 1942. After the first prototypes were completed by January 1943, the prototypes passed trials, but the vehicle never saw mass production. I really like this tank. I really like the way it looks. It's curved. It deflects all kinds of damage. It doesn't have much armor, but it doesn't need it because it deflects a lot of the damage because it's just curved all over. Damage, it can do, it can pretty much penetrate anything of its tier. It did kind of have a little bit of trouble with KVs, but not too much. It was a lot of fun. It was a good tank. But if you compare it to the M4, I would go with the M4 Sherman. That's just a better tank. But this is not bad. This is a fun tank. I really liked it. And I just had it up until yesterday. I sold it to try out the new stuff that just came out. But overall, good tank. Really enjoyed it. Alright, let's move over. You go from the TE-1 Cunningham to the tank destroyers of the American line. The T-18 was development of this first, or the self-propelled gun on the chassis of an M3 light tank started in October 1941. Prototype passed trials in the spring of 1942, but the vehicle was never mass-produced. This is a Tier 2 American tank destroyer. I love this thing. It looks like a freaking mailbox. But this thing was awesome at Tier 2, and it had the 75mm howitzer M1A1. This gun was incredibly powerful, especially at only Tier 2. This thing was a blast and did all kinds of damage in its tier. I mean, it just dominated all Tier 1s and could almost just shred everything in Tier 2. It was just phenomenal. I love this thing. As you can see, I did not try the max gun on it, but the 75mm howitzer was incredible. Alright, from there we went on to the next one in line. Here, I'll go back here. You see here, T82. T82 has the 105 howitzer. The 105 howitzer is a great gun for the Tier 3. However, I did not like this destroyer. It is extremely fragile. There's not much to it. It was a grind, I'll admit it. This was a grind. It was not a lot of fun playing this thing. Plain and simple. I did have to grind through it. Development of the T-82 started in December 1943. The vehicle was put on trials August 1944. It never saw mass production nor entered service. So yeah, I just did not like this tank at all. Okay, now we're going to go down the old line that they originally started with. Over here is the new line that was just introduced today. Alright, so we're going to go from the T-82 to the T-40. The T-40 was incredible. I loved this gun. Here it had the M1A1 from the Tier 5 medium tanks on a Tier 4 destroyer. This in a Tier 4, this thing was incredible. You upgraded it to that gun, the M1A1. This thing just penetrated, did all kinds of damage to everything in its tier, and definitely destroyed everything below it. This thing was incredible. It had some pretty good armor for being a tank destroyer. The survivability on it was actually very enjoyable for me, and it's actually built on a M4, Sherman M4 chassis, so it has that slope to the front. I love this thing. We look at the details on it. This was an experimental tank destroyer developed on a chassis of the M3 tank. Oh, my bad. It was the M3. And the spring of 1942. The vehicle never entered mass production nor saw service. But in game, this thing is incredible. I love this. Great for farming credits too. Alright, then we move on to the M10 Wolverine, which is what I have now. So we're going to close this and look at it in the garage. We get a better view of it here. Here it is, fully upgraded. You can see it's curved. It's got curves on the slants on the side. You see the front slanted, sides are slanted. Back has a slant, but slightly boxed. You can see how these are sloped. See how the turret is sloped, so it deflects. I mean, this thing is awesome. Alright, let's read our records, details. So this is the M10 Wolverine. This is the most widely produced American tank destroyer, with a total of 6,706 vehicles. This came in two basic variants, manufactured from September 1942 through January 1944. There are more than a third of all Wolverines were supplied to Allied nations under land lease. Alright, this thing is awesome. I love this tank, or this destroyer. It's got a turret on it, so of course the top spins, instead of regular TDs, which have fixed guns in the front that do not move. They move slightly left to right, up and down, but they don't turret like a tank. This one does. It is awesome. Alright, we're going to check out the next one here. Now, that's all I got there. And then I started over here with the brand new. This stuff just came out today. Now, I did try this one. It's the M8A1. It's fast. It's very, very, very fragile. And for, being Tier 4, it's okay. You know, I mean, as far as its penetration, what damage it does, it's okay. I can't say it was anything fabulous or great. So we look at our details here. It says the vehicle was intended as a self-propelled infantry support gun on the basis of the M5 tank. Produced by the Cadillac Car Division, a total of 1,778 vehicles were manufactured from September 1943 through January 1944. So this was a real one that was actually used in combat. But in game, it's not a grind. It's okay. I mean, it's fun, but it's just an okay destroyer. Alright, now here's the T-49. I do not have it yet, but I will kind of touch on it here. This is one that I will be getting and will be filming for future videos. Developed in the spring of 1942 after undergoing trials, the decision was made to replace the 57mm gun with a 75mm. The new design passed trials in the fall of 1942, but never saw service. So this is the same tier as the Wolverine. I'm going to get it just to kind of check it out and see how it goes, but we'll just have to play around with it and see what happens. Alright guys, so we're going to cut it there. All these others that are grayed out, we will talk about as I get them in the future. And we'll actually have some gameplay for those tanks. Alright, so till next time guys, remember all my social networking is in the description below. Please remember to comment, rate, and subscribe if you want to see more tanks or any of my other series I have going on. Until next time guys, I will see you in game.